You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hi, and thanks for coming back to Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. We haven't spoken for a while. I took 2 days zero in Damascus, and I've been hiking for the last 3 days, and I thought I would record some of this in the forest. And the bird song, which has been quite prevalent in the last 10 minutes. Oh, there's someone. There's a bird making noise. It's 9 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday morning, and the stillness in the forest is glorious. There's no wind. You do hear the birds every now and then. If you're lucky, you hear a woodpecker from time to time, but it's a thoroughly beautiful morning. But before we get into the show, and I'll quickly sum up what I did in Damascus. Before we get into the show, let's hear from our sponsor, Sawyer. When I hit the trail in 2014, I soon discovered that I come with the wrong water filter. Everybody else had a Sawyer squeeze. Eventually I bought a squeeze and I loved it. I'm going again this year, and top of my list of things to buy was the new micro squeeze filter by Sawyer. Like all Sawyer stuff, it just works. You can filter up to 100,000 gallons, and their full-size squeeze filter comes with a lifetime warranty. Last year, believe it or not, more than 4 million people got clean water through a Sawyer water filter. But if you think that Sawyer is just about water filters, you could not be more wrong. Nope, they supply everything to protect you, both in the backcountry and the backyard. Protect your gear and clothes as I did with their permethrin fabric treatment, which is 100% odorless after drying. With all the ticks and bugs around, this is an absolute must. They also provide sunscreens and first aid products. Find out more by visiting Sawyer.com. Thanks as ever to Sawyer. I really appreciate them being part of the show. Well, this week, as I say, we had I took a rest. I think the last time we spoke, I think I podcasted on Friday afternoon. I was utterly exhausted. I don't know whether it was just that I needed that rest or I was suffering with something. I wasn't sure really what it was. And I think it did me more good psychologically than physically. It allowed me to reset. I think every now and then you do have to do that. You do have to reset your game. You've really worked hard to get to where you are, but sometimes you just run out of juice. And I had run out of juice totally. Even though I got very quickly into Damascus that morning, it just took me, I think, 3.5 hours to do 10 miles. By the time I got there, I was just wasted. And I spent a lot of time just sitting out, looking at the river, with a beer, to be fair, and watching soccer sometimes as well. But I'll tell you about what happened on that in when I talk about the 2 rest days. Days 47 and 48, Damascus, 0 days. Well, the first one, day 47, was a Saturday, and I soon discovered that the breakfast was phenomenal. They have biscuits and gravy. In fact, I had biscuits and gravy, I had eggs, I had bacon, I had toast. I think I had fruit one day, I had cereal one day, and I pretty much rammed calories down my face, as we're meant to do, because I have been losing weight far more quickly than I think even I expected. Anyway, I had an appointment that first morning. Some months ago, I was approached by a guy called Dwayne, who's a college professor at Catawba College, and they have, believe it or not, Catawba College honours course called Finding Yourself on the Appalachian Trail. And this course adopts historical, sociological and environmental approaches as the primary lens through which students engage the trail. Man, I could not have made up a better course myself. So these students, as luck would have it, Dwayne reached out to me. They were in Damascus, and they were actually they'd been hiking the Grayson Highlands, which we were just about to come up to, and they'd been, as a reward for their hike, they were going to do the bike on the Virginia Creeper Trail that day. So they were in Damascus, and Dwayne asked if I could possibly meet them before they went out. And so, of course, I would. And it's always amusing to me, as I say, that people would want to hear from me, but I suppose I'm now getting experienced at this. And I went to the bike shop and I spoke to, there were about 15 students, 16 students, I guess, men and women, boys and girls. They're in the 18 to 21-year-old age group. And they asked me a few questions. I told them about my experiences, and generally I felt good being able to help them in their course. Can you imagine that? And I wondered whether any of them would like to do this, do the full through hike, and several said they would. And just, it was a really nice thing to get engaged with these people who are touching the AT, I guess, for one of the first times. And what a course for someone to do. Amazing. So while I was up that end of town, I went into the Mojo Cafe, which had Wi-Fi, which is pretty limited in this town, by the way, and watched my team, the Mighty Blues, lose. I watched them on my phone. And as I say, they lost. Nightmare. I bumped into a hiker in there, a young lady called Grizz, who she hikes with a dog called Roo, who barks at everybody. But certainly barked at me a lot. Maybe he knew I'd been bitten before. And I was introduced to her boyfriend as well. That was nice to see them. And on the way back, I dropped into Crazy Larry's. Crazy Larry's is a well-known hostel on the trail. And Larry is a friend of mine on Facebook, so I thought I'd say hi. Got back to the room then, because really the purpose of being there, apart from resting, was to watch the Masters. So basically the rest of the day, I watched the Masters on TV till about 6. And then I'd put out on Facebook an invitation for anybody who was in Damascus to meet me at Damascus Diner in the evening. And there was just one hiker part of the time. He and I spent a nice evening together, had a beer, had some meatloaf, and it was an enjoyable day altogether. And I felt very, very rested. The next day was another day of sport, and it basically was entirely sport. I watched the Chinese Grand Prix, 2 soccer matches, and then the Masters, which, because of rain the previous day, because of projected rain later that day, instead of being starting at about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, it was starting at 9 in the morning. So I watched that, and I don't know about the rest of you, but for me, Tiger winning was the greatest comeback in sport I've ever seen. It was amazing. I've got to tell you, I shed a few tears. I just thought he was amazing, and it was great to see. And I'm so glad I stopped there. And I went out and did a resupply. I needed 4 days worth of food because I knew I'd be hiking the next day. And I got my food for that. And I was going to buy some new poles. And shows how little I still know about hiking. I didn't know you could just change the tips of your poles. So I took my Leckies to Mount Rogers Outfitters, and they just changed the tips. And you know what? I said, how much do I owe you for that? And he said, just send me your picture of the top of Katahdin, which I thought was such a lovely thing to do. So I'm ready to go for tomorrow back hiking. Day 49. Damascus, mile 470.5 to Lost Mountain Shelter, mile 486.6, a 16.1 mile day. I worked out that, and certainly you have to do this when you're preparing for 4 or 5 days back in the woods, you have to work out your food, obviously. So I worked out I want to be in Marion in 4 days. And that is, and the way I thought about it was going to Partnership Shelter, which I'll tell you about in a minute, which is mile 534. So it was going to be 64 miles before I was going to be back in town. So even I can work out that 16 miles a day. So I wanted to make sure I was able to do that. So I got 4 days worth of food. Perhaps sometimes, I think most people over cater food wise. If you get precisely what you need, you should get into town with nothing left in your bag, which is always helpful. Partnership Shelter, by the way, is a place where you can call for a shuttle, and you can actually call for a pizza there and get a shower there. So that would have been nice if I'd actually stayed there. But one of my buddies, Clay Bonham Evans, a friend of the show, was, or in fact is, coming out to meet me. I'm recording, as I say, Thursday morning. He's coming towards me right now, I believe, and he's got his car at Partnership Shelter. So when we do get there later on the day, we're going to just drive straight into Marion. Because I needed these 16 miles a day roughly, the first shelter was Saunders Shelter, only 10 miles. So Lost Mountain was the only real option. And I thought to myself, 16 miles might be a bit tough, having just had 2 days off and struggling before. But really, the forecast was good, even though the day started quite gloomy and it rained a little bit. But eventually that rain was burned off and it was nice. You leave Damascus along some of the Virginia Creeper Trail, which is a slight climb out of the town, which is fine. And then you suddenly get the direction that you have to go back into the forest again, and you climb a proper climb after that. And because I'd had yet another catastrophically huge breakfast, or calorifically huge breakfast, the calories really pushed me on. It was about 4 miles to the top, but only about 1,000 feet. So 250 feet per mile is a really gentle climb. So I kind of enjoyed the climb. And then there was a really nice down, which once again was quite gentle. These long climbs down, which are very, very steep, really do stress your knees. But the ones that just go down quite gently, say that 250 foot a mile, are just perfect. They're just lovely to walk along. So I was really enjoying myself. And then eventually you get back to the top of, I guess it must be near the top of the Virginia Creeper Trail, before a big climb at the end of the day. And there were plenty of people at the shelter, including Cushy Life, who is called Cushy Life. Well, she'd explain herself later. And Ugg. And I hadn't seen Ugg since before Hot Springs. It's funny how the trail brings people back together again. And we were all sitting around just chatting and so on. And Cushy Life was asking everybody what their favourite day on the trail was so far. And I can't remember what I said. But I think we all gave our favourite day so far. My favourite day so far had been hiking from Carver's Gap over the beautiful balds, looking down on the clouds in the valleys below. That for me was magnificent. But Cushy Life, I think she may have asked the question because she wanted us to ask her as well. And she told us a lovely story. So I asked her if I could record her. And she said, yes, of course. So here's what Cushy Life's favourite day was. I'm here with Sarah, who is Cushy Life, and she just told us the story, so I'm not going to act surprised, but it's quite an amazing story, and I think it will resonate one or two listeners here. So tell us what you just told me.
Well, we were just talking about what our favorite experiences on the trail so far. We're getting close to 500 miles, so
sure.
we've had most of us, a couple months, or at least a month and a half on the trail. And mine was back right before we hit 100 miles before Albert Mountain. We were at a campsite, and my cousin Spinner, who was on the trail with me at the time, went to the privy in the morning, and the two people in front of her said, don't go in the privy, there's a dog and we think he's injured. And so she immediately went right into the privy, and sure enough, because why wouldn't you,
yeah,
right?
which was dangerous, yeah.
But she immediately went in, and the dog came right to her, and he was so grateful that somebody was paying attention to him.
And what state was he in?
And he was very emaciated. He had obviously been out by himself for a very long time, and he was limping. He had one of his paws was injured, or his arm, or somewhere in one of his legs. So Spinner brought him back to the campsite, and people were having breakfast and breaking camp, and started feeding him. And we had cell phone coverage, so I was able to call out.
Did he eat straight away?
He started eating right away. In fact, he was like almost uncontrollable. Like he was jumping on people. He was trying to get their food. He was, just couldn't. But we were cautious to not give him too much, because I also know that when somebody's emaciated or starving, like you can't overfeed them, because their system can shut down.
Sure.
So we balanced it out, but everybody was pitching in and giving food, and we got a little bit of cell phone coverage. We put something on Instagram. I texted Rob, who works at Outdoor 76, who's down in Franklin, down below us, and then we started calling police dispatch and U.S. Forest Service and animal control.
Everyone was working together.
All points bulletin went out, and
that's what social media should have been about.
And you know what? It was actually some people on Instagram that called U.S. Forest Service, and they were able to talk to animal control and get the gates opened, because it's this time of year, the gates are still closed on a lot of these Forest Service roads.
Yeah.
And we hiked out with this wonderful dog who we named Bozo because he was acting like a bozo. So we hiked out with Bozo. We used my Kevlar tree strap and used it as a leash.
Oh,
and
really?
He settled right down once we started walking with him. We had food, and about every half mile we would stop and we would give him more food. Right. And he kind of limped his way out. By the end of it, we were picking him up and like moving him over logs because he was so exhausted. But he made it the 6 miles, and as soon as we came down towards Albert Mountain, there was a Forest Service road, and the animal control came right up at the moment we came
timing.
out. So we signed him over to animal control I signed him over on the condition that he would go to a no-kill shelter.
Now, I've got to tell everybody, I knew nothing about that. Maybe all Americans know about no-kill shelters, but apparently in the South, they have kill shelters.
Right, because if you have an abundance of dogs and you can't afford to take care of them, and even if they've been in the shelter for a year, 2 years, at some point they decide that the dog's life, they need to make room for other dogs.
Right.
So I turned him over with the condition that he was not to be killed, and they had my phone number, and I was to be contacted if they were going to make moves with this dog. Right. In the meantime, somebody had been at the campsite with us, who was a section hiker. We had his phone number and we were communicating with him. He decided he was going to adopt the dog. So they put him on a 10-day waiting list and checked Bozo over medically, and he was sound. I don't know exactly what was wrong with his arm, but as he started feeling better and he was eating and drinking, and he got a clean bill of health. And on day 8, the original owners came in and got him. And he was a walker hound. He was a bear hunting dog, which I guess are pretty expensive dogs. Mm. And they're just bred to do this. They're bred to chase a bear at all costs, and a lot of them have like microchip collars that their owners can track them with, but his was gone or didn't have one. God, so anyways, it was an amazing day, and here we are almost at 500 miles, and still that's one of my favorite memories.
I'm sure it is.
So
it's a fantastic memory. Really, I really love it. Now, one last thing I'm going to ask you, because I know, but why are you called Cushy Life?
Oh, so I am hiking my hike in my own way, and I am doing it. I love hiking. I'm not so sure about the camping part yet. Like the cold and the wet and all of that. I do. So, but I love hiking, and I get totally charged up by hiking. So I take just as much time in town and in people's houses and in hostels and hotels as I do on the trail. And
you stayed with Ryan and Jerry Lynn, as I did the other day.
I stayed 5 days with them.
5 days.
Yes,
impressive.
I sure did. I love their family. And actually, 4 of their family members hiked with me while I was there those 5 days.
That is very cool.
So it was amazing. But for me, the hiking is a conduit to experiences and people along the trail, and I'm just taking full advantage of that.
That's fantastic. It's a lovely story, and I really appreciate telling us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Cheers. How about that? She saved a dog, a bear hunting dog, so I'm not sure what sort of dog that actually is. But people are so kind, and I love the way everybody pulled together. It really was nice, and it was one of those days at camp, and it makes me want to keep up with these people, which I know is a problem for me because I'm probably pushing myself too much. But to be honest with you, I felt good after this day. It was only 16 miles, but first day back, I felt good, and I really felt that rest I'd had in Damascus was worth it. Of course, it was worth it for the Masters anyway. So it was a great atmosphere. And I got myself into bed and got myself ready for next day, which was going to be day number 50. Oh, before I forget, because she'll never forgive me if I do, Chrissy Funk wants to tell you something.
Hey everyone, Chrissy Funk here, aka Rebound. I am seizing this moment to ask you to support an event in an area many of us fall in love with each year. Harpers Ferry Boulevard Trail and Town Alliance and the ATC once again are throwing another fun party this April 27th and 28th. Mark your calendars. It is the 5th annual Appalachian Trail Flip Flop Festival. Again, 27th, 28th, this April. Coming down. So skip the FOMO, listen on. Embrace the weekend champion you are. It's more than just trails in Harpers Ferry and the Town and Boulevard. This event has tons of activities, workshops happening throughout the weekend. It's packed with REI workshops, educational seminars, a fun alumni shindig I'll be at. Hope to see you there. And there'll be bands, vendors, morning yoga, bird watching, ghost tours, and so much more. Okay, one more attempt at piquing your interest. As lashers, weekenders, out and backers, through hikers, we are the guardians of the trail, and this is one way for us to help spread information about protecting and embracing the Appalachian Trail. So please, help get people excited about the Appalachian Trail Flip Flop Festival. Yeah, thanks to my trail brother, Mighty Blue, all the generous volunteers to make this happen, and everyone for supporting this cause and helping us spread the word. So do one thing today that centers you, because you rock. Happy hiking all. Cheers.
Day 50. Lost Mountain Shelter, mile 486.6 to Wise Shelter, mile 504.1, 17.5 miles. This day, our 50th day on the trail, or my 50th day on the trail, gave me ponies. How bad is that, eh? Overnight, the previous night, the temperature really spiraled down and no wind blew. Normally I rely upon the wind to stop the condensation getting into my tent. But man, there was bad condensation. I had to towel dry it, which was okay. It wasn't the end of the world, to be honest with you. But the outside of the sleeping bag was kind of damp. I was warm enough when I went into bed. I just had a t-shirt and underpants. It was nowhere near enough for the reduced temperature. And I added my puffy in the night to keep myself warm. But I woke early and to clear my condensation out. And I was actually out by 8:10, which for me is incredibly early. I had a 4-mile endless climb to Buzzard Rock, but it was a beautiful, beautiful day. It was sunny and warm again. We've been really lucky with the weather in the last few days, really have. And Buzzard Rock is this great outcropping where you can sit up there, and I actually sat up there and had some peanut butter and filmed, and you've got this great 270-degree view. Just a magnificent sight all around. And, you know, I have noticed definitely the days and the memories are so much clearer when the weather is so much clearer and brighter. Let's face it, walking through a forest in the fog is not a lot of fun for anybody, or in a cloud. And so really, you don't remember those things. But you go up those beautiful mountains and you sit on the top of this rock and you can look out literally for 50, maybe even 100 miles. You can see valleys and you can see mountains and more valleys and more mountains in the distance. It really was a great place to be. The day was pretty okay generally, but there were these 2 long climbs, and this second long climb took us up to Thomas Knob Shelter. And when I was really tired when I got there, and I wanted to get to Wise Shelter to make my last 2 days to Marion easier. It looked like on the profile just about 5.5 miles downhill, and I totally forgot walking this before, and I wish I'd remembered. I tell you, I started walking with Devon, who I ran across obsessing over some wild ponies. She's a young woman. First time I've met her, actually, quite tall, blonde woman, and she was taking selfies with the ponies. I hope she never got any ticks. Oh dear, that would be terrible. And so she started hiking with me, and we eventually caught up with Hawkbait, who's another young woman I've hiked around for the last few days as well. And I soon remembered when we started walking the rocks. I mean, I'll keep saying Philadelphia. Pennsylvania is so well known for the rocks. It's called Rocksylvania. You don't call Virginia Roxinia or whatever it is. But man, the rocks on the downhill. And each one of them seemed to be at such an angle to dig right into your feet. It was really, really uncomfortable, I tell you. And I was going down there thinking, this 5 miles, I thought it'd take me 2 hours because it was nice and easy downhill. Well, it actually did take me not much more than 2 hours, because these 2 girls kept me honest with my hiking. You know, they allowed me to hike, and not that I was trying to compete to keep up with them, but they set a pace which I could just about keep going, and I didn't stop on the way down at all. And we got to camp by about 5:30. I set up in my tent near the shelter. It was another really good group, and it was just another good evening where you sit around eating your food and chatting, and eventually get into bed. So that was the end of day number 50. Day 51, Wise Shelter, mile 504.1 to Trimpey Shelter, mile 524.2, 20.1 miles, and my longest day so far. I'll tell you about the hiking itself in a minute, but when I woke up, actually it was the previous night, I was at the shelter, pretty exhausted after that hike. And I heard a young lad playing his, sounds terrible calling him a young lad, he's 29, a youngish guy, playing his guitar, but he was playing it in his tent or by his tent, away from everybody else. He was very respectful of other people's space, and it sounded really, really nice. And I guess my British reserve, such as it is, prevented me from talking to him too much about it. And as luck would have it, in the morning, a lot of people set off early, and in the end there was just me, cushy life, and this young lad called Frizzle at the shelter. I said to him I'd heard him the night before. Would he play? And he said, yeah, he'd love to. And in fact, he told us a story about himself as well, which was interesting. So I recorded him playing, and I recorded a little conversation afterwards. I've got to tell you though, before I play it, he hiked the AT last year and got injured in Grayson Highlands, which was where we were. And he was going to restart this year from Damascus. And he said to his mother, make sure that you budget. So how did he budget? When he got to Damascus, he bought a guitar. Typical. Of course he did. And I think his mother, when she hears this, will be delighted that he bought a guitar.
All right, so this is a song that I wrote just after I got out of the woods about 10 years ago. I was sitting on the front stoop of my mother's home, and I just started freestyling on her guitar.
Cool.
This is kind of what I came up with. All right. Whispers call me baby, I'll call you dear. When words are like the pictures of time, moments shedding tears, lost to sleep. Maybe this time I wrote myself too deep. All these years just staring at my watch, spend the rest of them just trying to recall. What I misplaced is nothing worth a cent. Greedy man justifies before he repents. If I walk away, would you tell me that you'll meet me at the end, my only friend? And if I told a lie, would you tell me that you'll be there by my side? I don't have to hide, I'm alright. I'm alright. I'm alright. I'm fine. If I sail away on the largest ship you've ever seen before, would you ask for more? And if I walk away, would you tell me that you'll leave me place to stay? I don't have to say I'm alright. I'm alright. I'm alright. I'm fine.
Very nice.
Thank
Excellent.
you.
Really good.
Thank you.
Now, you're all right. And
I'm all right.
You weren't always all right, were you?
No, so music for me came about as a byproduct of childhood, that I chose a path that a lot do choose. When I was about 15 years old, I kind of just started doing a bunch of things that a 15-year-old shouldn't do, selling drugs and cherishing things and money over family. And I distanced myself to the point where my mom and dad intervened, and they sent me to a wilderness program where I spent...
And this was a serious wilderness program.
This was a serious wilderness program.
Man.
Yeah, man. This was like I was a beach boy with long blonde hair, never been off the beach, you know, real spoiled and prissy. And 89 days later, I was like Bear Grylls coming out with like a massive beard, you know. So, and I knew everything. I was fully certified in wilderness search and rescue when I left as a responder. There was 3 different phases.
So you were in there for, say, 89 days,
89
so 3 months.
days,
3
yes.
months. And when was that? And, you know, what time of the year was that? And what were you left with?
So this was we left in the wintertime. So this was just before February, and I was left with no lighter, no flashlight, no proper shelter.
Did your parents like you?
No, not at the time. I don't think so. I think they loved me, and I don't think they were even fully aware of what they had signed me up for. But we had food drops every Wednesday, and we hiked about 12 to 15 miles per day with our group with 60-pound packs for sure, because we had 0-degree sleeping bags because of our lack of shelter.
Of course.
And there was a group of me and about 4 others. Group B was Curtis, me, Frizzle, Sam, and Truman. And they were all similar stories to myself, all really good kids. If any of them ever happened to hear this, I love you guys. And
you bonded for life, I guess, didn't you, really?
We did and we didn't. I don't know what happened to Truman. I don't know what happened to Curtis. But I know Sam was my good buddy from New York, and we remained in touch for several years. Fell out of touch when I had my son about 8 years ago.
Okay.
But before that...
So what was the impact? Tell us about the impact.
The impact, it basically saved my life. It gave me, instead of my outlet running away, which I still did for many years and still do sometimes, hence me out here and looking for things. But instead of running towards negative things and cherishing money, I learned the value of nature, and I learned that it literally changes your brain chemistry. And for me, at least, the depression, the anxiety, the self-worth manifested itself into drug use, into selling drugs, which then in turn negatively influenced a lot of other people. So I had a karmic debt to fulfill. And all this walking and all of this peace and all of this nature and all of this kindness and giving back is kind of my own guilt in a way for knowing full well that as a young man, I didn't care what happened to the people. And I want my life and the legacy that I leave for my son to be 180 degrees.
Cool.
And I don't want anybody to...
You told us you're in a solid situation with your girlfriend now.
Absolutely.
And you've had doubts whether you wanted to come the day before you came.
Yeah, and finally, years and years later, I have a solid home. My girlfriend hiked with me last year on the AT, and we have a wonderful relationship. Our dog was with us, and for the first time, I have a home that I'm proud of, that is beautiful. And the day before I was set to come out here again and hike the AT, I was like, man, look at this. Who's this guy? Who's this life? Yeah. And I almost didn't come because for the first time, I didn't want to run away from the life that I created. And it is truly our, Kayla and I's creation. And
I'll tell you what, I'm glad you came. I'm glad you shared your story with us and your music. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, man.
I wish you well. Keep going.
For sure.
Appreciate it. Cheers. Wasn't that lovely? And well, spending some of your budget on a guitar, as far as I'm concerned. And what a really nice young man. I really enjoyed his company. So when I set out, I had Trimpey in mind, which was 20 miles, and I knew that seemed a hell of a long time, a hell of a long way rather. But I also had a potential bailout at 15 miles, which was a paid-for tenting site, $16 for tenting and $2 for a shower, which I was considering. But I started off with a wonderful walk in the Grayson Highlands. I mean, there were rocks. I know there were rocks. But for some of the time I was with Devon, I think it was, hiking for a little while, and then I think Hawkbait. And I think it was Devon said, "This is otherworldly." No, it was Hawkbait said, "This is otherworldly," and it really was. We were on this beautiful meadows, and Devon could spot ponies in the distance. She does love a pony, I've got to tell you. Turns out she was an outdoor guide at some stage in her life, so she could spot these things. But it was just magnificent scenery all around us, and once again we had beautiful, beautiful weather. Once outside the highlands, there were more rocks and there were a lot of flooded paths. There's a lot of water coming down from these mountains, and we were walking very often up paths which were flooded and getting pretty high on the old shoes. I had peanut butter for pre-lunch, as you do, at the Old Orchard Shelter with a guy called Helliver, great name, and Tijuana. And then I got my groove, and by Hurricane Mountain Shelter, I'd caught up with Ugg and Hawkbait for lunch. So sitting there, and I think Helliver joined us as well. And I was getting tired by now. I was about 12 miles in and about 3 miles from my bailout point. And it was now getting a bit later. It's 2-ish, 2:15, something like that. And for me, another 8 miles was going to take, as far as I was concerned, at least 4 hours. So I thought it'd be 6:15, 6:45, something like that before I got to camp, which would have been okay. But it's really whether or not my feet could take it. And frankly, my feet are starting to hurt me a bit. That's what really was hurting me in Damascus. My feet were feeling beaten up. And they do feel beaten up because, some of these rocks are so sharp. But I got to the bailout. It was downhill, which meant tomorrow it would have been uphill. And I just suddenly got a second wind. I don't know why. And I thought to myself, my day tomorrow will be so much easier. And I'm talking about my day today, but I was then thinking my day tomorrow would be so much easier if I got to Trimpe Shelter. So I thought, I'm going to get there. And that change in attitude really helped me. And I don't know what I'm psychologically suffering from time to time, but I need some goal that really makes sense to me for me to be able to really hike well. And I started taking off. And in fact, I think I eventually got there with there was still plenty of light at 6:15. So I'd walked for 10 hours with two breaks, 2 lunches effectively, and done 20 miles. So it was pretty good. I had another listener moment with a woman called Stumbelina, which is a great name, by the way. And Stumbelina, she was sitting having some food, and I was walking up, and I said, "Hi," and she did a double take at me and said, "Are you Mighty Blue?" I said, "I am." So we chatted a little while, which was really nice. And she was on a section hike, quite a long section hike, and I saw her later at camp. And when I got into camp, there must have been already about 12 or 13, maybe 14 tents already up, and there were hammocks hanging in different places. It was a regular tent city. Well, I found my spot because I knew it was going to be a decent night weather-wise. I didn't particularly want to sleep in the shelter. But that was actually confirmed because in the shelter, there were these mice who could not care less that humans were around there. At that time, there were 3 people who were going to be in the shelter. One of them, a guy called Buddy, he'd had enough of this, seeing these mice literally running around, almost taking the pee out of all of us, just running backwards and forwards and jumping around the shelter. So he then set up his tent as well. It was that night where you just kind of hang out with people, you're talking from one tent to another, and I really enjoyed it once again. I think I'm in a bit of a bubble right now. There's a lot of people, and I'm glad I did that 20 miles to get to Trimpe. I'm going to save the next day, which is today, getting to the next shelter, which is Partnership Shelter, for next time. So that is the end of day number 51. I just want to say a few words just before we close about listening to your body. And I had a conversation with somebody today about this. I think men often don't listen to their body. Women often do listen to their body. And I think women are a lot more successful in these hikes often because they are aware of what's going on with them. Men just don't seem to give a darn, And I think I listen to mine in Damascus, even though I know I was going to be off on the Sunday for the Masters, but I felt I needed that break. And those two and a half days I was in Damascus actually really helped me. And you can see that in these 3 days, I've done 16, 17 and 20 miles, which prior to Damascus, I would never have believed I could do. I mean, I did an 18 once and I did I think a 16 once before, but those consecutive days of 53 miles, 53 miles, was something that proved to me that I'd done the right thing and allowed myself to realize I needed that rest. Having that rest was critical for my health of these last 3 days. I'm back on course again. I'll fall off it again, no doubt in the future. But right now I feel I'm going really well. I'm being joined by a pal of mine, Clay Bonham Evans, who is going to hike with me for 3 or 4 days. And we're going to enjoy these next few days. We're going to cut down the miles a little bit because he's effectively a section hiker, even though he did the trail before. We're going to do maximum 15 miles, more like 12 miles for the next 3 or 4 days. But I feel that rest is something that everybody should consider. I'm also, interestingly, and I've just thought of this, I'm really hydrating much better than I did before. I'm putting, what's that word for it? Gosh. The electrolytes, putting the tablets with the electrolytes in to my water every other litre. And so I think I drank 4 or 5 bottles yesterday to do my 20 miles. And for me, I was doing 1.5 bottles tops. So I think stopping every time I come to a stream to get water is turning into a really good strategy for me. Just thought I'd let you know that. I'll see you next time.